The gilded ballroom was a cage, and Catherine felt the bars closing in. Everywhere, laughter tinkled like shattered glass. She stood behind a heavy velvet curtain, the fabric absorbing the sound of her ragged breathing. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. She had followed her fiancé, Connor Torrin, drawn by the cold knot of dread that had been tightening in her stomach all evening. He thought her safely distracted by the champagne and the string quartet. He was wrong. Through a narrow gap in the curtains, she watched him in the adjoining salon, his posture obsequious, his smile a painted grimace. He was speaking to Lord Harrington, a man whose wealth was matched only by his cruelty. And beside Lord Harrington stood his daughter, Lindsay, her gaze a venomous caress as she looked at Connor. The merger is contingent on this, Torrin. Lord Harrington's voice was a low growl, carrying easily into her hiding place. My daughter's happiness is paramount. Of course, my lord, Connor said, his voice slick with ambition. Catherine was merely a stepping stone, a temporary arrangement until a more suitable union could be secured. A stepping stone. The word struck her with the physical force of a blow. She is a commoner's daughter with a pretty face, Connor continued, waving a dismissive hand. Her family's name is mired in debt. My association with her was a miscalculation, a youthful folly. Lindsay laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. And what of her debts? The ones you so gallantly absorbed? Consider them paid, Lord Harrington grunted. The cost of acquiring my new son-in-law. A small price for a clean slate and a connection to the Harrington fortune. It was a transaction. She was not a person, not a fiancé, not a woman he professed to love only yesterday. She was an asset being liquidated. Her world tilted, the glittering chandeliers blurring into streaks of cruel, mocking light. Humiliation washed over her, hot and suffocating. She had been sold. Her future, her family's honor, her very heart. All traded for a corporate merger and a wealthier bride. She needed to run. She needed to disappear before Connor found her, before the pitying or triumphant looks could find their mark. Backing away from the curtain, her heel caught on the hem of her own gown. She stumbled, falling out from her hiding place and into the edge of the main ballroom. A few heads turned. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She had to get out. Her eyes scanned the room, a chaotic sea of silks, jewels, and indifferent faces. Then she saw him. He stood alone near the grand terrace doors, a figure of stark shadow against the shimmering backdrop of the party. Duke Browen, the Iron Duke. A man whose name was a whisper of fear and awe in every corner of the kingdom. He was tall and imposing, his black evening wear a stark contrast to the colorful peacocks surrounding him. A faint, silvery scar traced a line from his temple to his jaw, a permanent mark of some forgotten violence. His eyes were like chips of granite, cold and unreadable. He was a monster from a fairy tale, a recluse who rarely attended such frivolous events. They said he was ruthless, that he had built his immense fortune on the ruins of his enemies. They said his heart was as scarred as his face. In that moment, Catherine did not care what they said. She saw not a monster, but an escape. He was power. He was untouchable. And he was her only way out of this room without dissolving into a puddle of shame. Desperation was a wildfire in her veins. It burned away her fear, her propriety, her lifetime of careful deference. She pushed herself to her feet, straightened her gown, and began to walk toward him. Each step was a lifetime. The eyes of the room followed her, a current of whispers trailing in her wake. She could feel Connor's gaze on her back, sharp and alarmed. She did not look back. She reached the Duke, her breath catching in her throat. He did not acknowledge her at first, his gaze fixed on some distant point over the manicured gardens. She had to speak. She had to make him see her. "Your Grace," she whispered, her voice trembling but clear. His head turned slowly and those stone-cold eyes settled on her. They held no warmth, no curiosity. Only a flat, assessing stillness. Her courage almost failed her. This was madness. But the memory of Connor's words, a stepping stone, was a spur. "Will you dance with me?" she asked, the words a desperate plea disguised as a bold request. The silence around them thickened, becoming a heavy, expectant blanket. She saw the flicker of surprise in the depths of his eyes, the first crack in his iron facade. He looked past her, his gaze sweeping the room. He saw the gossiping lords and ladies. He saw Lindsay's sneer. He saw Connor frozen halfway across the room, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. The Duke's eyes returned to hers. A long, agonizing moment passed. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he extended a gloved hand. "I will," he said. His voice was a low rumble like distant thunder. The sound broke the spell. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Catherine placed her trembling hand in his. His grip was firm, cool, and impossibly strong. He led her onto the dance floor, the other couples parting before them as if a king were passing through. The orchestra, as if on cue, began a waltz. He pulled her into the formal hold of the dance, his hand a firm, unyielding pressure on the small of her back. The world narrowed to the two of them. The whispers, the stares, the suffocating humiliation. It all receded to a dull, distant roar. "You were in distress," he stated, not a question. His movements were precise, leading her effortlessly through the steps. "I was," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Your fiancé, Mr. Torrin, seems displeased." "He is no longer my fiancé." The words tasted like ash, but saying them aloud gave them a strange finality. The Duke's expression did not change, but she felt a subtle tightening of his hand. "I see," he said. They danced in silence, a vortex of calm in the swirling storm of the ballroom. For the first time all night she could breathe. His presence was a shield, his formidable reputation a wall that no one dared to breach. When the music ended, he did not release her. He held her there, in the center of the floor, his gaze fixed on her face. "This was a temporary solution to a permanent problem," he said, his voice low and for her ears only. "What is your plan now, Miss—" "Catherine," she supplied. "Catherine Thorne. And I have no plan." "A woman in your position, without a plan, is a lamb in a den of wolves," he observed coolly. "Then perhaps I need a wolf of my own," she countered, a spark of defiance she didn't know she possessed igniting within her. For the second time that night, she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. This time, it looked almost like approval. "Come with me," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. He led her from the dance floor, past the stunned onlookers, past a furious Connor who took a step forward only to be stopped by a single, glacial look from the Duke. He did not take her to the terrace or a quiet corridor. He led her straight to the study where her fate had been sealed only minutes before. Lord Harrington and Lindsay were still there, their triumph turning to confusion as the Iron Duke entered without permission. "Your Grace?" Lord Harrington began, flustered. "This is a private—" "It is no longer." The Duke cut him off, his voice dropping several degrees. He gestured for Catherine to stand beside him, a clear and public alignment. Connor burst into the room behind them. "Catherine, what is the meaning of this? You will not embarrass me." "You have already accomplished that on your own, Mr. Torrin," the Duke said, his quiet intensity silencing Connor instantly. He turned his gaze back to Catherine. "You require protection," he said, "and restoration of your family's honor." She nodded, mute. "I require a wife," he continued, the words dropping into the stunned silence like stones into a still pond. Lindsay let out a choked gasp. Lord Harrington's face went white. Connor stared, his jaw slack with disbelief. Catherine's own heart stopped. A wife? She echoed, her mind reeling. A duchess, he clarified. It is a position that comes with certain immunities. It would solve your immediate problems. This was not happening. It was a dream, a feverish nightmare born of humiliation. And what would you gain, Your Grace? She managed to ask, her strategic mind kicking in despite the shock. A shield, he said simply. The king grows weary of my unmarried state. A wife provides a useful social disguise. It allows me access to circles I typically avoid. It ends the incessant matchmaking attempts. It was a contract, as cold and transactional as the one she had just escaped. But this time, she was not the commodity being sold. She was a party at the negotiating table. A contract then, she said, her voice gaining strength. Precisely, he confirmed. A marriage in name only, for a period of 6 months, at the end of which, we will arrange a quiet, amicable separation. You will leave with a generous settlement and your honor fully restored. Your family's debts will be cleared immediately. He was offering her everything she had lost, and more. It was a lifeline. It was a weapon. She looked at Connor's aghast face, at Lindsay's sputtering rage. She looked at the cold, calculating, and strangely honorable man before her. He was offering her a cage of gilded steel, but it was a cage of her own choosing, and from within it, she might just learn to fly. I accept, she said. The Duke gave a single sharp nod. He turned to the assembled horrified audience. Lord Harrington, he said, his voice resonating with absolute authority. It seems your prospective son-in-law is no longer available. As of this moment, he has a prior commitment. To my future Duchess. He took Catherine's hand again, his touch a brand of ownership and protection. We will have the announcement made tonight, he declared, to avoid any confusion. The final word was aimed directly at Connor, a silken threat that promised ruin if challenged. The drive to Blackwood Hall was a blur of darkness and speed. Catherine sat opposite the Duke in his cavernous carriage, the rhythmic drumming of the horse's hooves the only sound between them. The announcement had shattered the ball. The shock, the frantic whispers, the look of utter ruin on Connor's face. It was a dizzying, terrifying vindication. Now, in the cloistered silence of the carriage, the enormity of her decision settled upon her. She had bound herself to the most feared man in the kingdom. She studied him in the flickering lamplight. His face was all harsh angles and shadow, his expression unreadable. Obligated. That was the word he had used. He felt obligated to help her. Why? Why did you help me? She asked, breaking the silence. His eyes met hers across the carriage. I dislike bullies, he said, as if it were the simplest explanation in the world. And I recognized your name. My name? Your father was a military strategist, the Duke stated. A brilliant one, before his fall from grace. He wrote several treatises on logistical command. I have read them. Catherine was stunned. No one remembered her father's career, only his ruinous debts. You are his daughter, the Duke continued. I wagered that some of that brilliance might have been inherited. Your actions tonight confirmed it. You did not break. You calculated. You chose the strongest piece on the board and moved it to your advantage. He saw her not as a damsel in distress, but as a strategist. A strange warmth bloomed in her chest, a feeling she hadn't realized she'd been starved of. Respect. The carriage slowed, turning onto a long, winding drive. Through the window she saw it. Blackwood Hall. It was not a home, it was a fortress. a sprawling edifice of dark gray stone that seemed to claw at the night sky, its windows like vacant, watching eyes. It was as imposing and unyielding as its master. The carriage stopped. A footman opened the door and the Duke stepped out, turning to offer her his hand. As she stepped onto the gravel, the massive front doors of the hall swung open, spilling a severe, rectangular block of light onto the drive. A woman stood silhouetted in the doorway. She was tall and thin, her gray hair pulled into a bun so tight it seemed to pull her face taut. She wore a simple, impeccably neat black dress. "Mrs. Blackwood," the Duke said. "This is Miss Thorne. She will be staying indefinitely." The housekeeper's eyes, as sharp and dark as a crow's, flickered over Catherine, taking in her disheveled ball gown and pale face. There was no welcome in them, only assessment. "Of course, Your Grace," she said, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion. "I will have the east wing prepared." "She will take the Duchess's suite," the Duke corrected her. Mrs. Blackwood's composure cracked for a fraction of a second. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly. The Duchess's suite had been empty for 30 years, ever since the Duke's mother was murdered. "As you wish, Your Grace." She recovered, her tone clipped. "Follow me, miss." The Duke gave Catherine a slight nod. "Rest. We will speak in the morning." He turned and disappeared into a dark corridor, leaving her alone with the formidable housekeeper. Mrs. Blackwood led her through a grand, echoing hall. The air was cool and smelled of beeswax and old stone. The decor was sparse, masculine, and severe. There were no flowers, no frivolous ornaments. Only dark wood, polished silver, and portraits of stern-faced ancestors. It was a house that held its breath. They ascended a sweeping staircase, their footsteps the only sound. "The Duke does not entertain guests," Mrs. Blackwood said, her voice sharp. "The staff is precise. You will find things run on a strict schedule." It was a warning. "I am a quick learner, Mrs. Blackwood," Catherine replied, her voice steady. The housekeeper gave a non-committal grunt. She opened a set of double doors, revealing a suite of rooms that was a stark contrast to the rest of the house. While still grand, the rooms were softer. The furniture was upholstered in deep blues and creams. The wood was a lighter walnut, and a large window looked out over a moonlit garden. It was a woman's space, preserved in time. "A bath will be drawn, a nightgown is laid out. Your belongings will be retrieved from your former residence tomorrow," Mrs. Blackwood stated, her efficiency like a military drill. She paused at the door. "The Duke has not brought a woman to this house since his mother's death. I do not know what your game is, miss, but be warned, he is not a man to be played with." Then she was gone, closing the door with a soft, final click. Catherine stood alone in the center of the vast room, the borrowed silks of her ball gown feeling like a costume. She had escaped one cage only to enter another, far grander and more mysterious. The next few weeks passed in a structured, quiet rhythm. Her days were spent in the vast library, devouring books on history, law, and economics. If she was to be a duchess, even a temporary one, she would be a convincing one. She learned the geography of the house, its echoing corridors and silent, dust-sheeted rooms. She learned the names of the staff, all of whom treated her with a distant professional courtesy, their loyalty clearly belonging to the Duke and his formidable housekeeper. Mrs. Blackwood watched her with an eagle eye, her stern demeanor slowly softening as Catherine proved to be quiet, respectful, and undemanding. A book left on a table would be returned to its shelf. A tray left outside her door would be neatly stacked. One afternoon, Mrs. Blackwood found her in the library, poring over maps of the duchy's landholdings. "The late Duchess was fond of this room," the housekeeper said, her voice softer than usual. It was the first time she had volunteered a personal comment. "She must have been a remarkable woman," Catherine said, looking at the portrait above the fireplace. The woman had the Duke's dark hair, but her eyes were warm and kind. She was the sun, Mrs. Blackwood said simply, and he, her shadow. When she was murdered, the sun went out. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken grief. Catherine saw the Duke only at dinner. Their meals were formal, silent affairs in the cavernous dining hall, the two of them seated at opposite ends of a table that could seat 40. He would ask about her studies. She would ask about his day. Their conversations were stilted, careful. Yet, she found herself watching him. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the deep-seated weariness in his eyes that had nothing to do with managing his estates. He was a man carrying an impossible burden. Their first public test came 2 weeks after her arrival. An invitation arrived, embossed with the crest of a prominent countess. A garden party. "We must attend," the Duke said at dinner, sliding the thick card across the polished wood. "They will all be there," Catherine stated. "Yes," he confirmed. "That is the point." On the day of the party, a selection of gowns was delivered to her room. They were not from a modiste in the city. They were from the Duke's own vaults, gowns that had belonged to his mother, exquisitely preserved. She chose a dress of deep emerald silk. It was simple, elegant, and radiated a quiet power. It was armor. When she descended the stairs, the Duke was waiting. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored day suit, his severe presence commanding the space. His eyes swept over her, and for the first time, she saw that flicker of something again. Not just approval, something more, something warmer. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. "You look appropriate," he said, his highest form of compliment. He offered her his arm. The garden party was a battlefield of flowers and polite smiles. Their arrival caused an immediate hush. All eyes turned to them, the Iron Duke and his mysterious commoner fiancé. He guided her through the crowd, his presence a silent declaration of her new status. The whispers followed them, a mixture of awe, envy, and malicious curiosity. And then she saw them. Connor and Lindsay standing near a rose trellis. Lindsay's face was a mask of petty triumph, her dress a confection of gaudy pink lace. Connor looked pale and haunted, a shadow of the arrogant man from the ballroom. They were unavoidable. Lindsay stepped forward, blocking their path. "Why, Catherine?" she purred, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I hardly recognized you. One would almost think you belong in such company." The insult was childish, but its intent was sharp. Before Catherine could respond, Connor spoke, his voice strained. "Lindsay, don't." "Don't what, darling?" she snapped, turning on him. "State the obvious? She's a stray the Duke picked up out of pity." Catherine felt the Duke's arm tense beneath her hand. He was about to intervene, to crush this woman with a single, icy phrase. But this was her fight. She met Lindsay's cruel gaze with a calm she did not feel. "It is true, I am new to this world, Lindsay," Catherine said, her voice even and clear. "Which is why I am so grateful to His Grace for his guidance. He is teaching me to distinguish between things of true value and those that are merely transactional." She let the word hang in the air, a poisoned dart aimed straight at Connor. She saw him flinch. "For instance," Catherine continued, her gaze sweeping over Lindsay's ostentatious gown, "he has taught me that true quality is about substance and elegance, not loud displays designed to cover a lack of substance." A small crowd had gathered, listening intently. Lindsay's face flushed a blotchy red. "How dare you?" "Oh, I dare," Catherine said, a cool smile touching her lips. "You see, unlike some, my position is not a temporary acquisition bought and sold to settle a debt. It is a partnership, and I am learning its value very quickly." She turned to Connor, her eyes cold. "Mr. Torrin, you look unwell. Perhaps the pressures of your new merger are more than you anticipated." With a final, dismissive glance, she tightened her hold on the Duke's arm. "Your Grace, shall we?" He looked down at her, and in the depths of his granite eyes, she saw it again, clear as day. A blazing, undisguised admiration. He inclined his head. "As you wish, my dear." He led her away, leaving Lindsay speechless with fury and Connor looking utterly defeated. As they walked toward the far end of the garden, the Duke's voice was a low murmur in her ear. "Inherited brilliance," he said. "I was not wrong." The praise, so rare and hard-won, felt more intoxicating than any champagne. She had faced her first test, and she had won. In the weeks that followed her victory at the garden party, a subtle shift occurred in the atmosphere of Blackwood Hall. The staff's professional distance warmed into a quiet respect. Mrs. Blackwood began to consult her on menus and flower arrangements, small gestures that were acknowledgments of her new role. Catherine's confidence grew. She was no longer just a refugee. She was the future Duchess of Blackwood, and she began to inhabit the role with an assurance that surprised even herself. Her evenings with the Duke became less formal. They would often retire to the library after dinner, reading in comfortable silence on opposite ends of a long sofa. Sometimes he would read aloud from his military histories, his deep voice filling the quiet room. She found herself listening not to the words, but to the cadence, the unexpected passion he had for the subject. She was learning the man behind the iron mask. She saw his fierce intelligence, his unyielding sense of justice, and the profound loneliness that clung to him like a shroud. But there were still locked doors. The entire west wing of the hall was forbidden. The doors were always locked, and the staff never spoke of it. Mrs. Blackwood had made it clear on Catherine's first day that it was the one place she was not to go. Her curiosity, naturally, became an obsession. One night, a fierce storm raged outside, rattling the window panes and sending drafts whispering down the corridors. The Duke had been called away on urgent business, a rare overnight absence. The house felt empty, and Catherine was restless. Driven by an impulse she couldn't explain, she found herself standing before the heavy oak door that led to the west wing. She tried the handle. Locked, as always. But as she turned to leave, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. On the Duke's keyring, which he had accidentally left on a hall table, was a single, ornate iron key that did not match the others. Her heart hammered. This was a betrayal of his trust. But the need to understand him, to see inside the final locked room of his soul, was overwhelming. With trembling fingers, she took the key. It fit the lock perfectly. The door swung open with a low groan, releasing a gust of stale, cold air. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The West Wing was not dusty and abandoned. It was an intelligence center. The main chamber was a vast circular room, the walls covered not with portraits or tapestries, but with enormous detailed maps of the kingdom. Lines of red and black thread connected different cities and estates, forming a complex web. Tables were covered with dossiers, coded ledgers, and stacks of intercepted correspondence. This was not the work of a reclusive nobleman managing his fortune. This was the work of a spy master. She moved deeper into the room, her eyes wide with disbelief. She picked up a dossier. It detailed the financial crimes of a baron she'd read about in the papers, a man who had mysteriously been ruined and arrested just last month. Another file contained evidence of treason against a powerful earl. The Duke wasn't just a wealthy recluse. He was a vigilante. He was hunting the corrupt nobility, the very people who ruled the kingdom. On a central table, a single collection of files was set apart, bound in black leather. She opened the top one. The title read, The Assassination of Duke Alastair and Duchess Ilara of Blackwood. Her blood ran cold. She read with horrified fascination. It was a detailed investigation into the murder of his parents, an event the world believed to be a tragic carriage accident. The report implicated a cabal of powerful nobles, men who feared his father's influence with the king and his efforts to root out corruption. Men like Lord Harrington. His name was there, circled in red ink. This wasn't just a quest for justice. It was a 30-year war of revenge. Everything fell into place. His isolation, his ruthlessness, the weariness in his eyes. He was not a monster. He was a soldier. And this was his war room. Her gaze fell to the bottom of the pile of dossiers. There was one more. It was thinner than the others, a simple manila folder. With a sense of profound dread, she opened it. Her own name stared back at her. Catherine Thorne. It was all there. Her father's history, his strategic brilliance, his manipulated fall into debt. Her own quiet intelligence, her education, her resilience. And at the bottom, a series of reports from an unknown informant, detailing Connor's financial troubles and his increasingly desperate negotiations with Lord Harrington. The final entry was dated the day before the ball. It read, Subject Connor Torrin will finalize the betrayal of Catherine Thorne at the Harrington Gala. The Harrington-Torrin merger is a front for illegal arms smuggling, orchestrated by Lord Harrington. Torrin is the pawn. Catherine Thorne is the leverage to be discarded. She is strategically brilliant but emotionally vulnerable. An intervention may be necessary to secure her as an asset. An asset. The word echoed the one she had heard from behind the curtain. She was a stepping stone, a pawn, a commodity. Their meeting was no accident. Her desperate plea, his surprising acceptance. It was all a calculated move in his grand secret game. He had not been helping a woman in distress. He had been acquiring a tool. The warmth she had felt, the respect she thought she'd earned, it all curdled into a bitter, icy poison. She felt used, manipulated. The humiliation she'd felt at Connor's betrayal was nothing compared to this. That had been the betrayal of a weak man. This was the betrayal of a master manipulator. She dropped the file as if it were on fire. The sound of the heavy oak door opening behind her made her jump. Duke Browen stood in the doorway, his riding coat spattered with rain, his face a grim mask. His eyes, usually so cold, were blazing with a dark, unreadable emotion. He had returned early. His gaze went from her face, to the open files on the table, to the dossier with her name on it lying on the floor. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the howl of the wind outside. "You were not meant to see this," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "No," she shot back, her voice trembling with a rage she had never known. "Pawns are not meant to see the board." She gestured wildly at the maps, the files, her own name on the dossier. "Was any of it real?" she demanded, her heart shattering. "The dance? The offer? The so-called respect for my father's work? Or was I just an asset to be secured?" She threw his own recorded words back at him, her voice cracking with the pain of the deception. He did not flinch, but a muscle tightened in his scarred jaw. "At first," he admitted, his honesty more brutal than any lie. "It was a strategic opportunity. Harrington's circle is one I needed to penetrate. Your public humiliation at their hands provided the perfect opening. Your intelligence made you a valuable potential ally." "An ally?" She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You call this an alliance? This is manipulation. You used my lowest moment, my deepest pain, for your own gain." "Yes," he said, without apology. His simple affirmation stole the air from her lungs. I have been fighting this war since I was 10 years old, Catherine, he said, his voice raw with a pain that mirrored her own. I have used every tool, every person, every opportunity at my disposal. I have lied, cheated, and destroyed lives to bring my parents' murderers to justice. I did what I had to do. And what am I in all of this? She cried. A means to an end? Another piece in your game of revenge? You were, he said, taking a step toward her. You were a piece in the game, but you are not anymore. He stopped, his eyes locking onto hers. The fire in them was gone, replaced by a vulnerability she had never seen before. It was terrifying. It was captivating. I did not anticipate you, he said, the admission seemingly torn from him. I did not anticipate your courage at the garden party. I did not anticipate the peace of reading with you in the library. I did not anticipate that the silence in this house would feel empty when you were not in it. He had planned for the strategist. He had not planned for the woman. The rage in her chest faltered, confused by the raw honesty in his eyes. He walked past her to a heavy iron safe in the corner of the room. He worked the combination and pulled it open. He did not retrieve a weapon or more files. He pulled out a thick, leather-bound ledger. He walked to the fireplace, where the embers of a dying fire still glowed. This is the ledger containing your family's debts, he said, holding it out. The original document, the hold I have over your family, the reason you were bound to Connor, and subsequently, to me. Without another word, he tossed it into the fireplace. The dry pages caught instantly, curling into black ash, the red ink of the numbers flaring brightly before vanishing forever. The debt is gone, he said, turning back to her. The foundation of our contract. You are free. There is nothing binding you to me or this place. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, heavy purse. He placed it on the table next to her. This is enough gold for you and your family to start a new life. Anywhere you choose. A carriage will be ready for you in the morning to take you wherever you wish to go. He was giving her a choice. A real, unconditional choice. She stared at him, her mind reeling. He had just willingly destroyed a key piece of leverage and offered her complete freedom. This was not the act of a cold manipulator. This was a grand gesture, an apology written in fire and gold, an act of profound, terrifying trust. He had shown her his secret. He had confessed his sins, and now he was letting her go. She looked from his face, to the ashes in the grate, to the freedom embodied by the purse of gold. She could leave. She could run from this world of shadows and revenge, from this complicated, wounded man. But where would she go? Back to being Catherine Thorne, the disgraced commoner? Or she could stay. She looked at the web of intrigue on the walls. She looked at the name of Lord Harrington, the man who had orchestrated her humiliation, circled in red. Leaving meant letting them win. Connor, Lindsay, Harrington. Staying meant fighting back. You were wrong about something, Your Grace, she said, her voice quiet but firm. He waited, his expression tense. You said I was a pawn who was not meant to see the board, she continued, pushing the purse of gold back toward him. Now that I have seen it, I have no intention of walking away from the game. His eyes widened, the granite facade cracking to reveal a raw astonishment. I am not your asset, and I am not your pawn, she declared, her voice ringing with newfound power. From this moment on, I am your partner, an equal. You will share your intelligence. You will listen to my strategies. We will bring these people down, together. She was not just accepting her place in his world, she was demanding it, redefining it. A slow, incredulous smile spread across his face, the first genuine smile she had ever seen from him. It transformed his harsh features, erasing the years of pain and solitude for a fleeting moment. It was breathtaking. A partnership, he repeated, the words filled with wonder. On new terms. On our terms, she corrected him. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. He did not touch her, but the air crackled with an energy that was more intimate than any embrace. Then let's begin, partner, Duke Browen said. Lord Harrington is attending the Royal Masquerade Ball in 2 weeks, and he plans to propose a toast to his new business alliance. Then that, Catherine said, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the fight, is where we will ensure he chokes on it. The Royal Masquerade Ball was the pinnacle of the social season, a night of fantasy and intrigue, where the kingdom's elite hid their true faces behind masks of silk and porcelain. It was the perfect stage for a public execution. In the 2 weeks leading up to the ball, the West Wing became their sanctuary and their war room. The dynamic between them had fundamentally changed. They were no longer master and ward, but two generals planning a campaign. Catherine's strategic mind, honed by years of studying her father's work, flourished. She saw patterns in the data that Browen, focused on revenge, had missed. She cross-referenced shipping manifests with intercepted letters, uncovering the true nature of Harrington's merger. It was not just arms smuggling. It was a plot to supply weapons to the kingdom's enemies, funded by a network of corrupt nobles, with the final act being the assassination of the king himself. Browen's war for personal revenge had stumbled upon an act of high treason. He's not just a murderer, Catherine realized, her finger tracing a line between Harrington's name and a foreign port. He's a traitor. And he is using Connor and his father's shipping company as the unwitting delivery service, Browen added, his face grim. If the plot is discovered, the Torrens will take the fall. Harrington will emerge clean, having eliminated a business rival and any trace of his involvement. It was diabolical, and it was brilliant. Their own plan had to be better. They worked side by side, late into the night. The formality between them dissolved, replaced by the easy camaraderie of soldiers in a trench. Mrs. Blackwood would leave trays of food and coffee outside the door, her silent, knowing support a comfort. On the night of the ball, a palpable tension filled the air of Blackwood Hall. Catherine stood before the mirror in her chambers, Mrs. Blackwood making the final adjustments to her gown. It was a creation of midnight blue silk, embroidered with silver thread that mimicked the constellations. It was elegant, powerful, and understated. Her mask was simple, a silver domino that covered only her eyes, adorned with a single, dark blue feather. "You look like a queen," Mrs. Blackwood said, her voice thick with a rare, undisguised emotion. "I feel like a soldier heading into battle," Catherine replied. "Sometimes," the housekeeper said, meeting her eyes in the reflection. "They are one and the same." Browen was waiting for her at the bottom of the grand staircase. He was dressed in stark black, a single silver thread in his waistcoat the only embellishment. His mask was unadorned black silk, making the sharp line of his scarred jaw seem even more formidable. When he saw her, he stopped breathing for a moment. He didn't offer a compliment. He didn't need to. His eyes, dark and intense above the edge of his mask, said everything. He held out his arm, and she took it. Their fingers intertwined, a silent promise of unity. "The king has been alerted," he murmured as they walked to the carriage. "He has his royal guard stationed discreetly. He is waiting for the proof." "And Harrington will deliver it himself," Catherine finished. The ballroom of the royal palace was a breathtaking spectacle of opulence and illusion. Thousands of candles glittered in the chandeliers, their light refracting off jewels and shimmering fabrics. The air was thick with perfume and secrets. They moved through the crowd, a vortex of dark power. Everyone knew who they were, even with their masks. The Iron Duke and his enigmatic fiancé were the subject of every whisper. They saw their targets across the room. Lord Harrington stood with a group of influential ministers, his peacock mask failing to hide his arrogant smirk. Lindsay, in a garish gold costume, clung to Connor's arm. Connor looked like a ghost at the feast, his face pale and sweating under his simple mask. He was a man walking to his own execution, and he didn't even know it. The plan was set. The trap was laid. As the night wore on, the tension mounted. Catherine and Browen danced. They drank champagne. They played their part as the kingdom's most intriguing couple, all while their eyes never strayed far from their prey. Finally, the moment came. A drumroll silenced the orchestra. Lord Harrington stepped onto a small dais, a glass of champagne in his hand. "Your Majesty, my lords, ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice booming across the silent hall. "Tonight, we celebrate not just this magnificent occasion, but the dawn of a new era of prosperity." He gestured grandly toward Connor. "Through my partnership with the fine Torrens shipping family, we are poised to expand our kingdom's commercial reach as never before." The king, watching from his throne on a raised platform, gave a slight, non-committal nod. "To seal this momentous alliance," Harrington declared, "I have arranged for a small token of our future collaboration to be presented tonight, a symbol of the riches that await us all." On cue, 2 footmen carried in a large, ornate chest. This was it, the moment of Harrington's fatal miscalculation. Catherine's heart pounded. She felt Browen's hand tighten on hers. According to their intelligence, the chest was supposed to contain a sample of fine silks and spices from the East, a symbolic representation of the legitimate trade that was masking the treason. But Catherine had used Browen's network to send a new set of instructions to the docks, signed with a perfect forgery of Harrington's seal. Harrington smiled triumphantly and gestured for the chest to be opened. Connor, standing beside him, looked confused. This was not part of the plan, he knew. The lid was lifted. A collective gasp swept through the room. The chest was not filled with silks. It was filled with rifles. Foreign-made military-grade rifles, bearing the crest of the kingdom's sworn enemy. On top of the weapons lay a single damning piece of paper. A letter, written in Lord Harrington's own hand, detailing the plot to arm the rebels and assassinate the king. Harrington's smile froze, melting into a mask of pure horror. "What is this?" he sputtered, staring at the evidence of his own treason, publicly displayed for the entire court to see. "This is a mistake, a trick." He turned on Connor, his eyes wild with panic. This is your doing. You fool, you've ruined us." Connor stared at the rifles, his face ashen. He finally understood. He had not been a partner. He had been a scapegoat. I knew nothing of this," he stammered, turning desperately to the king. "Your Majesty, I swear it." The king rose from his throne, his face a thundercloud. "Lord Harrington," the king's voice was like the crack of a whip, "you have brought weapons of our enemies into our very home. You have plotted against our life. You have committed high treason." "No, it's a lie, a frame-up," Harrington shrieked, his composure shattering completely. From the edge of the crowd, Browen spoke, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "A lie, my lord? Or a simple logistical error on your part?" All eyes turned to him and Catherine as they stepped forward. "Perhaps you sent the wrong crate from the docks," Catherine added, her voice cool and clear. "The one containing the evidence of your treason, instead of the one containing the silks to disguise it." Harrington stared at her, comprehension dawning in his terrified eyes. He finally understood who had outmaneuvered him. "You!" he hissed, his voice trembling with rage. "The commoner bitch!" Browen took a menacing step forward, but Catherine put a hand on his arm, stopping him. This was her victory. I am no commoner, my lord, she said, her voice ringing with authority. I am Catherine Thorne, daughter of a brilliant strategist you and your conspirators disgraced, and I am the future Duchess of Blackwood. She looked past him, directly at the king. Your Majesty, further evidence of the conspiracy, including the names of every noble involved, has been delivered to your royal guard. The king gave a sharp nod to his captain, who stepped forward. Lord Harrington, the king commanded, his voice ringing with finality. You are under arrest for high treason. Seize him. Seize them all. The guards swarmed forward. Harrington screamed and raged as he was dragged away. Lindsay fainted into a heap of gold silk. Connor simply stood there, broken and empty, before being led away for questioning. The great conspiracy was shattered. In the stunned silence that followed, the king's gaze fell upon Browen and Catherine. He descended from his platform and approached them, the remaining courtiers parting before him. Duke Browen, the king said, his voice resonating with gratitude. For 30 years, you have been my secret sword, hunting the rot from within my kingdom. Today, you have saved my life and my throne. He then turned to Catherine, his eyes filled with a profound respect. And you, Miss Thorne, he said, you have the mind of a general and the heart of a lioness. You have not only restored your family's honor, you have saved us all. The king drew his own ceremonial sword. Kneel, he commanded. Browen and Catherine knelt before him. In recognition of your unwavering loyalty and extraordinary service to the crown, the king declared, his voice echoing through the grand ballroom. I, the king, do hereby elevate you. Duke Browen, you are now Grand Duke of the Western Marches. And Miss Catherine Thorne, I name you Sovereign Duchess of Blackwood, a title held in your own right. Rise as the two most powerful protectors of this realm. They rose, no longer just a duke and his fiancé, but a prince and princess of the kingdom, their power absolute, their vindication complete. The crowd, which had once whispered about her, now erupted into thunderous applause. Amid the roar, Browen leaned down, his lips close to her ear. Triumph looks magnificent on you, your grace, he murmured. Catherine looked at him, her partner, her equal, and a genuine, radiant smile lit up her face. As it does on you, your grace, she replied. The night was theirs, the future was theirs, and it was only the beginning. The journey back to Blackwood Hall was silent, but it was a different kind of silence than the one they had shared on their first night together. That had been a silence of tension and uncertainty. This was a silence of shared victory, of profound understanding. The weight of a 30-year war had been lifted from Browen's shoulders. The stain of ignominy had been erased from Catherine's name. When the carriage pulled up to the grand entrance, the entire staff was assembled on the steps, led by a ramrod-straight Mrs. Blackwood. As Browen and Catherine stepped out, the staff, in a single unified motion, bowed their heads. It was not the perfunctory bow of servants to a master. It was a deep, reverent bow of loyalty and respect. Mrs. Blackwood's stern face was etched with an emotion Catherine had never seen there before. Pride. "Welcome home, your graces," she said, her voice clear and strong. They walked into the great hall, which was no longer cold and imposing. It felt like home. Browen dismissed the staff, and soon they were alone, standing in the center of the vast, quiet space. The adrenaline of the night was fading, leaving behind a deep, resonant peace. "It's over," Catherine whispered, the reality of it finally sinking in. "A war is over," Browen corrected her gently. "Our life is just beginning." He led her not to the library or the drawing room, but back to the West Wing. The war room. It looked different now. Not like a place of secrets and shadows, but like a monument to a victory hard won. He walked to the central table and slowly began to roll up the maps. He started taking down the threads, dismantling the web of conspiracy piece by piece. "What are you doing?" Catherine asked. "This room was built for revenge," he said, his back to her. "I have no more use for it." He turned to face her, his expression stripped of all its iron control. All that was left was the man beneath, vulnerable, honest, and filled with a hope she had helped him find. "For 30 years, my life has had only one purpose," he said, his voice low and thick with emotion. "To avenge my parents, to honor their memory by finishing their work. I never thought about what would come after. I never allowed myself to." He took a step closer, his eyes searching hers. "Living was a luxury I couldn't afford. Until you." Her breath caught in her throat. "You walked into my life, a tempest of courage and fire, and you burned down all my walls," he continued, his voice barely a whisper. "You saw the monster and were not afraid. You saw the manipulator and challenged him. You saw the soldier and became his general." He reached out, his hand gently cupping her jaw. His touch was not possessive or protective. It was reverent. "You have given me back my life, Catherine, and now I find I do not wish to live it without you." The 6-month contract, the transactional arrangement. It all felt like a lifetime ago. "The king named you Sovereign Duchess," he said. "You hold your title and lands in your own right. You are beholden to no one. Our contract is meaningless now. You are free, in every sense of the word." He was giving her another choice, the most important one of all. "I know," she said softly, her heart hammering against her ribs. "So I am not asking you to honor a contract," he said, his thumb stroking her cheek. "And I am not proposing an alliance." He dropped to one knee. Catherine's eyes widened, tears welling unbidden. The Grand Duke of the Western Marches, the secret sword of the king, the most powerful man in the realm, was kneeling before her. He did not present a diamond. Diamonds were for transactions. Instead, he held out his hand, and on his palm lay a simple, heavy gold signet ring, warm from his touch. It was the Blackwood ducal ring, the one his father had worn. "Catherine Thorne," he said, his voice trembling with the weight of his words. "You are my partner, my equal, my strategist, and my heart. I love you. Will you do me the profound honor of becoming my wife? In truth, in spirit, for all of our days?" Tears streamed freely down her face, tears not of sorrow or humiliation, but of a joy so profound it felt like it could shatter her. She had started this journey as a commodity, an asset to be traded. And now, here she was, being offered a true and equal partnership, a crown, and a heart. She had not just found her power, she had found her home. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Browen. 1,000 times, yes." A radiant smile, brighter than any she had seen before, broke across his face. He slid the heavy ring onto her finger. It was a perfect fit. He rose to his feet, his hands framing her face, his eyes a swirling mix of molten silver and overwhelming love. "My Duchess," he murmured. "My Duke," she replied. And then he lowered his head and kissed her. It was not the chaste, performative peck of a contractual engagement. It was their first true kiss. It was a kiss of fire and shadow, of battles won and a future promised. It was the sealing of a partnership forged in desperation, tested in deception, and solidified in triumph. It was the kiss of two lonely souls who had found their other half in the most unexpected of ways. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms in the room where their war had been won, Catherine knew that her journey was not over. It was just beginning. Together, as the Grand Duke and Sovereign Duchess, they would not just rule. They would build a new world, one founded on the justice they had fought for and the love they had found. The Iron Duke was no longer just a name of fear. It was a name of hope, and by his side, the commoner who had dared to ask a monster for a dance would reign as his equal, his partner, his queen.